Good evening and welcome to the TroupCast here on oneBURGH. Glad you could join us here this evening for Thursday, March 6th. I am your host, Ed Troup. Glad you could join us on our oneBURGH Facebook channel, oneBURGH YouTube, or maybe you're listening back on Spotify. And joining me into the podcast once again is Mark Kaboly, but now he has a partner. How about that?
Whoa. I don't know about that.
The legend, Chris Mack, is now into the podcast with Kaboly. They host the Kaboly+Mack Podcast weekly on Facebook, YouTube, and on the X. Gentlemen, good evening and welcome into the podcast.
Hey, I think you need to get Mac to introduce Shabuzi or something like that right now.
No. Enough of that. Enough of that nonsense.
No Shabuzi?
No. That's the day job, Kaboly. Come on, we're focused on fun here. We're doing fun stuff. Even though I'm hanging out with you, I mean, Ed's here. He'll mitigate.
I have no idea who Shabuzi is, but I've heard the name before.
So I don't know who. If I don't know the name, then I must not know who it is, and I don't know if it's no good at all. Neither. If he ain't from Rostraver, he ain't no good.
Well. Ed's from Rostraver, so.
Now you're speaking our language, Chris.
No.
Chris, you've been working with Mark for a while now. I've known him for over 20 years. It's part of the reason why I'm bald. I hope you're not exactly. I hope you're not quite there yet, right?
No, getting there. Thinning out and graying a lot. Luckily, I keep them at arm's length. We do we each sit in our well-appointed basements to do the show, or Kaboly in his big fancy office. And so even though he's moved to the neighborhood, I never actually have to get together with him all that often. So yeah, it mitigates the direct exposure to Kaboom.
You're surviving.
Exactly.
Well, gentlemen, let's start and talk with free agency. The NFL free agency period here in the offseason will start next Wednesday. We're less than a week away, March 12th at 4 o'clock. It'll officially be underway. But as we know, the way this works, as early as this upcoming Monday, you'll start to hear everything come into play where contracts will be in place, and it'll just be a matter of time for these moves to become official. Let's talk about our Pittsburgh Steelers and what they are facing in free agency. Mark, let me start with you. Let's talk about targets for this team, that players that are on the market and potential Steeler gets starting next week.
Well, you have to do some house cleaning here. Not house cleaning, but some housekeeping here. You better find yourself a quarterback right away, and that must be done immediately. If it's Monday, if it's Tuesday, and if it's Justin Fields or if it's Russell Wilson, I think you have to start there. Then everything could be filled in behind that. But let me tell you something, man. I was crunching some numbers here, sort of like how Mac crunches numbers all the time too here. This team's going to have as much as $85 million worth of cap space if they can, they want to restructure a couple of deals. Man, I remember, last year we thought they had a lot, I think they had 12 or 18. They can go out and get anybody they darn well please here with 80 some odd $million. Of course, some of it's going to be Watt and some of it's going to be the quarterback. But man, they got a open canvas. Omar Khan canvas could be able to improve this roster quite immediately if they choose correctly right now. But it's just the usual positions. There's more positions right now, Ed, than names, I would say. You have to look at receivers, multiple. You have to look at running backs. You have to look at defensive line, and I'm not even throwing out a high price to maybe one of the top cornerbacks on the market here. But I expect them come Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday to be very active very early.
Chris, your thoughts on the upcoming free agency period where the Steelers have to start?
Yeah, I think like Mark said, with all that cap space, they have to make at least a couple big moves. I'll be curious to see how the TJ Watt extension, what kind of effect that has, because now that Max Crosby got paid, how much more does TJ need to get than Max Crosby? He signed his deal out in Vegas yesterday. So, if TJ's getting 35, 40 mil, I don't think that's not entirely crazy. That could eat up a decent bit. Now he's already got a cap hit for this year, 30 mil. So, adding another 5 or 10 on that could eat up some of this year's cap. And then the wide receivers, even if you have to trade for one and then pay him DK Metcalf, I think that's an option you have to consider. What's with the thumbs down, Kaboom? Why no DK?
Well,
if you can get him for a second round pick, you're essentially going to spend one of your top 2 picks on a wide receiver anyway, right?
Well, you're going to go second round pick. You're going to go $30+ million a year on a guy who's, what is he, 27, 28?
Right.
Okay.
That's extremely expensive. I mean, if it was one or the other, that's fine. If he at least didn't want a sign and trade type of situation, that's fine. But I'm not giving up a second round pick and then paying him $120 million, then have to dump George Pickens all in the process to add one guy.
Why you gotta wait? Why you gotta dump Pickens?
Well, if you're bringing DK Metcalf in, you're saying George Pickens is not my future. It might not even be my present at that time. You bring in Metcalf, I think the next corresponding move is George is on the trading block. I think.
Well, guys, there's no doubt that they got to go free agency wide receiver, right? There's some big names on that list that are going to be available. You mentioned DK Metcalf as a trade possibility. Chris Godwin's another name. Devontae Adams, of course, surfacing as the Jets just cut him this past week. But here's a name that I thought was kind of intriguing for Steeler Nation as well, Stephon Diggs. Diggs will be out there. He'll be available. Marquise Brown's another one. Amari Cooper, out of Cleveland. But the list goes on and on. If you take a look at what's going to be available, Chris, the Steelers have plenty of options at the free agent position.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not going to take a big swing at a move for Metcalf, or, I think Mark and I over the last few weeks have kind of ruled out the idea of T. Higgins. That seems like it's locked up and done in Cindy now. Right. With the franchise tag, then it's Chris Godwin. He's the next one on the list, and he's not 30 yet. So, similar in age to Metcalf, but probably $8 to $9 million a year cheaper. So you get Godwin, you get somebody who can, run from the slot while Pickens stretches the field. I think that makes a ton of sense. Diggs, I don't like, just for the simple fact that he's coming off a pretty major injury. And he's been a constant malcontent over the last couple of years. He wasn't as vocal in Houston, right. But the divorce with Josh Allen in Buffalo was a messy one. And that's the last thing I need. If we're bringing in someone to complement George Pickens, Ed, the last thing I need is someone to act as a toxic twin to George Pickens.
I mean, we always we talk about swinging big with the wide receiver. What about adding 2 above average to very good ones? I mean, you talk about toxic in Stephon Diggs. All I hear about is Amari Cooper. He's the best guy in the absolute world. And Buffalo wasn't very interested in making any one guy stand out wide receiver-wise. So him and a guy like Keenan Allen, that might be a avenue they try to take too, rather than, trying to hit the old grand slam. Yeah. A couple doubles might not be bad either.
Guys, are there any quarterbacks on the free agent market and that the Steelers might try to target? I know Sam Darnold's out there, Daniel Jones, of course, Aaron Rodgers, right? That's the name surfacing in Steeler Nation as well. I think everybody kind of shares the same opinion on all these guys. As hot as that wide receiver free agent market will be next week, the quarterback market, not so much.
I mean, Mark knows better than I do, but I can't see them spending money, committing, $25 million a year, whatever it may end up being for Sam Darnold. That doesn't make a ton of sense. I think it's cross your fingers and pray that Justin accepts whatever offer they've probably tendered him already. And if Justin hits free agency, he doesn't get wildly overpaid by one of the New York teams, right? Like, I think that's what it is. And then the fallback option is Russ. And hope that in the meantime, between Justin deciding what he wants to do and talking to Russ about signing whatever offer they may have on the table for him, you don't get screwed and end up with no quarterbacks, and then you're in Aaron Rodgers land, Mark.
Yeah, I think they feel pretty confident that if Justin decides to sign with New York, or any other team, that Russell's there. And at this point, I think I would probably take Russell over any other free agent currently on the market, or not on the market. If it's Kirk Cousins, if it's Derek Carr, if it's whoever, I probably would much rather have Russell Wilson for another year than that. So I think they're pretty confident that if Fields does go somewhere else or wants to get paid more or just whatever, that they will be able to roll it back with with Russell. Now, I guess there is an outside possibility that neither one of them will be around. Then you're in deep crap. that 6-10, 5-12 season might be right there, because all of a sudden you're going with
Jameis.
Who knows?
Jameis. Let's get a year of Jameis.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yes. Mark, do you think that the Fields deal, if it were to be done, will be like we'll hear maybe this upcoming weekend or early next week if they are to get a deal in place?
I don't think so. Honestly, I don't know how that would benefit him. I mean, he probably knows right now who's interested in the ballpark of what salary that they're being offered. And he knows he's, for some reason, probably because his age, he's probably one of the top guys out there that people would want to go after. So what's it going to hurt him just to wait and see if anybody comes in at the last minute? So I don't think it benefits him unless the Steelers overpay him, which they don't overpay anybody. And Justin realizes that, the market is not as robust as I might think. It's the only way possible. If not, just wait. Just wait till, you go through the tampering period, then you'll be able to figure it out. And it's not going to make it past Wednesday. I can guarantee you that, but I wouldn't do it anything over this weekend. Saying that, it'll probably happen Saturday.
Chris, if you had your choice between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, who do you got?
I'd go with Justin. That just because I think there might be a little bit more ceiling there to explore. He is younger. Russ is cooked. I've told Mark this a million times. Hold on, let me finish.
He's not that bad.
Russ
is talking about.
I didn't say he was bad. I've been very clear about this. He's not bad. He's just way past his prime. He and Aaron Rodgers both these days remind me of what we got the last couple years of Ben, which is occasionally. Can I minor profanity here, Ed? Am I allowed
Absolutely.
to say? Okay. Occasionally they shoot a lightning bolt out of their arse, right? Lightning bolts out of their ass and they steal a game. We saw it from Ben the last couple of years. You see it from Rodgers still in tiny glimpses, right? You see it from Russ in tiny glimpses. Look at the Cincy game. Look at the Washington game. It just doesn't happen often enough to carry a team that otherwise, a roster that otherwise is built to go 9-8, very deep into the playoffs, right? So Russ is a fallback position where everyone will go, okay, yeah, we were kind of comfortable with it last year. Let's try it again because we don't want Daniel Jones or Jameis Winston starting for us this year. Fields, at the very least, showed you that, A, he's willing to work within Arthur Smith's system, and B, make the most out of it. I understand the fumble issues were something to be concerned with, but the kid went 4-2 in his 6 starts, and I think that's a decent building block if you were to hold on to him, give him another full season as the quarterback without having to look over his shoulder constantly at Russ and wonder when he's going to come back and take the job, to show you what he's capable of. And then you go into next year's draft, maybe drafting quarterback if you have to.
Mark, how about you? Are you a Russell Wilson or Justin Fields guy as far as who they should have under center next season?
Well, I think it makes sense. It's Justin. I mean, younger, have more upside, have a chance to actually be a guy that could, although unlikely, be their franchise quarterback. He has their best opportunity. Of course, Russell's 36, 37. But I don't think if Justin is not the guy, I don't think he is cooked. I mean, I don't look at the last 5 games of the season and say, boy, this guy stinks, man. He is just awful. Of course, he got a short window left of his career, but I don't think he was terrible last year late in the season. So, of course, Fields makes the most sense, and I would go that route. As I'm not guaranteeing or not assured that Fields is going to sign and he's going to be any better than anybody else. I mean, what history does Justin Fields has to tell us that they sign him, he's going to be a legit good starting quarterback? The 6 games last year where he averaged 18 points a game, 16 points a game, and they were limited? No. So, I mean, Justin makes the most sense. That's who they want. That's who they hope to get. But I don't think they can go wrong with fallback plan with Russell either.
Well, I agree with you both. If they don't get Russ or Wilson under contract next week and they got to hit the reset button completely, that will not be good for Steeler Nation. We're talking with Chris Mack and Mark Kaboly of the Kaboly+Mack Podcast. You can catch it on Facebook, X, and YouTube weekly with both of these guys talking all of Pittsburgh sports and sports in general. Also some WWE talk as well. We may get to some of that a little bit later. Gentlemen, let's talk about current Steeler free agents. We already talked about quarterback. The next big outside of wide receiver, of course, is the running back position. Najee Harris set to hit the free agency market next week. All indications once the season ended was that Najee would not be back with the Steelers. However, Mike Tomlin has expressed in recent weeks he's a Najee guy and he's interested in possibly bringing Najee back. Chris, I'll start with you. Your thoughts on Najee Harris. Will the Steelers re-sign him? Should they re-sign him, or is he gone?
I mean, I think it's a very similar scenario to Justin Fields in that you kind of know what you have. Is there maybe a little bit more room for growth? Maybe. But he's going to get overpaid on the open market. And that's where the similarity to Fields lies. Justin, if he hits the open market, is probably going to get overpaid more than the Steelers are comfortable paying. Same thing goes for Najee, I think, at this point. Whether it's in Vegas, where they had no run game last year with Josh Jacobs off to Green Bay, somewhere else where they need a running back that they feel like can carry the ball 250, 275, 300 times, and they can lean on, even if they know they're only getting 3.9 yards a carry out of it. I think there will be somebody out there that will pay Najee. And I think, again, the Steelers come around to the fallback option of nothing great maybe being available on the open market. Aaron Jones, who had a decent year in Minnesota, J.K. Dobbins had a decent year with the Chargers, Dowdle in Dallas, if he doesn't get re-signed, Raheem Mostert. But none of those guys really is a race to sign them on the first day of free agency type. I think you wait to see which one shakes out amongst that second-tier running backs, and you have someone to pair with Jaylen Warren, and maybe you find something in the draft, 3rd, 4th, 5th round.
One thing you see is in free agency, it's a buyer's market, I guess. I guess that's how you put it, early in free agency, where the players are breaking the bank. Once you get past about day 2, that price tag keeps going down and down and down and down. And when you have a bunch of average running backs on the free agency market, at some point they're just saying, I need a job. And the longer you wait, the cheaper you can get them. So I think that is definitely the avenue they're going to take. Now, if you're looking for a name, I would like to kick some tires on J.K. Dobbins. I mean,
right.
He seems like a guy that would fit. I know he's more of a Jaylen Warren type, but Dobbins still has the ability to break some longer runs as well. That's what you need here. You need somebody that can go more than 14 yards at a clip. Then maybe, and you see these stats thrown out there all the time. They're the least efficient offense running the ball in the past 4 or 5 years, 3.6 yards. There's a reason for that, because they don't break long runs.
Yeah.
You have a couple of long runs in there, and that makes things a little bit different. So they need somebody who can do that. And maybe they go the draft route, but you can't anticipate that. So I would imagine that they do find somebody in free agency that they can bring in. Maybe the Dowdle.
Yeah, good job.
You got it. From Dallas, right?
Small Valley pronunciation strikes again.
Hey, Najee could go to Dallas. I mean, Najee works out in Houston, I think, all the time. So he's pretty familiar with Texas. So maybe he goes that way.
You know, one interesting name out there, guys, I want to get your opinion on is Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb will be out there. We know his injury history. However, he could be a possible, sign for the Steelers to maybe look to go side, Jaylen Warren. Of course, they got to get Warren under contract too. Remember, he's a protected free agent, right, Mark?
Or if restricted. All they have to do is tender him. And if they tender him, he's more than likely he has to come back. Somebody else would have to offer him a deal. Steelers could match it.
Right.
So nobody's going to offer Jaylen Warren a deal. So,
but your thoughts on Nick Chubb?
Well, I think Nick Chubb needs to be healthy. I mean, that's the key to this all. I mean, I think he still has the talent, but what is he now? What are we looking?
29.
No, what are we looking like? 16 months or something from that injury? How long has that been?
Yeah, that's over a year and a half.
Yeah,
but you can probably get him cheap. I guess you can get him cheap. I don't know. Depends on how healthy he is, but he's another great locker room guy, nice guy, and would help out that locker room a lot. I mean, Najee was liked by the players, but he could be abrasive at times. So for the most part, over the past couple of years, they've got rid of the majority of those people. So I'm all for bringing in the Amari Coopers and the Nick Chubbs of the world just to.
You try and make it brown soft down here, Kaboly. What are you doing?
No, I'm just trying to make it like a favorable place to walk into and not everybody calling you names and stuff.
No, I think the Chubb idea is a good one, especially if he sits through the first day or two of free agency. I mean, how many times do we see guys have these major knee injuries? It's not necessarily about the first year back. It's about the second year back off the injury. And I think that's a huge opportunity. Chubb's 29. I know he's getting towards the end of a running back career in the NFL. But like Spot Track has his current market value. I know Kaboly loves to look this up. He's a Spot Track guy. $3.3 million a year. That's a bargain for a guy that has the track record that Nick Chubb does. Again, totally understand the concern about the health and the injuries. But I think if you're willing to take a little bit of a gamble on him next to Jaylen Warren, I don't hate that at all. For $4 million. And again, you're rolling the dice on, is the second year after the injury going to be the big comeback year?
$3 million, man, ain't nothing. That's like next salary.
Especially when you have 80 million in cap room, it sounds like, Mark, you start out with, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's $3 million, man. That's like Cordero Patterson money.
Speaking of which, is he back?
I think so.
You think they'll hang on to him for another season? I just so. hopefully no more carries or looks on third down for Patterson, right? I think we saw enough.
You know what? He is not a bad option of being a running back in the pinch. You know, I think the kickoff was a little bit disappointing last year. The kickoff returns. I don't even know if he had any. To be honest with you, I don't think he thought he was used enough. I thought he's talented enough. He
had a really solid game. Was it the Indy game? The Indy game, yeah. I think. He
early in the season.
Maybe the Detroit preseason game.
No. The Indy game, he actually had a quality. Like, he came in when Najee went off in the third quarter, I think, for a little bit.
He's a big dude.
There was a whole drive in that Indy game that was the Cordell Patterson drive.
Patterson actually looked pretty good early in the season before he got hurt. And then when he came back, just didn't seem to have what he had early in the season. Gentlemen, let me give you a couple free agent names and let me get your opinion. Will the Steelers retain any of these guys or try to retain any of them? Mike Williams at the wide receiver position, yay or nay?
Let's hope not.
I mean, if they'll actually use them, I don't have a problem with it, but they're not going to use them. I mean,
James Daniels on the offensive line.
No.
I don't think so.
He might not even be healthy enough to play until.
Nate Herbig on the offensive line.
I think they need him.
Yeah, I mean, he's a quality swing backup, I would think, on the
interior. He can play center. He can play both guards. Yeah. And if you look, the depth at guard isn't tremendous. I mean, Sam Allou's hurt. Getting older, and McCormick is still a younger guy, so I think you have to have Herbig.
Have we seen the last of Dan Moore?
Yeah. He's going to get paid somewhere. Somebody's going to give him a decent amount of money.
And it's time anyway, right? Like, Fautanu on one side.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
what you have with Jones on the other. And
you have to go with your draft picks. I mean,
yeah.
In any other scenario, he probably returns. But when you got a 14th overall pick on one side and a 20th overall pick on the other side in back-to-back years, you better play him.
A few more names here on the list, guys. Van Jefferson at the wideout.
There's a great human right there. I like Van Jefferson, but he didn't quite live up to his – well, I guess he did live up to his expectations.
There's not that number two that I think they wanted him to be when they needed a number two desperately. Dante Jackson at the corner position, Chris.
I actually wouldn't have a problem bringing him back on the cheap. Mark and I were talking about corners the other day, and I don't know what they do beyond Peasy. I know a lot of people can't stand Joey Porter Jr. I like him, not just because he's a Penn State guy, Mark.
You knew
but because he's exactly what he's billed as. Like, he plays physical. Does he take a lot of flags because of that? Yes, but he's a physical corner. That's why they drafted him. The other side, I'd like to see maybe Corey Trice get some more run, but they don't have a true number two corner on this team, I don't think. So if Dante Jackson were available and came back on the cheap, I wouldn't totally hate it.
He's a good locker room guy, very stand-up guy. I thought he had 5-6 interceptions, and he probably dropped a couple more. He was around the ball all the time. You get him for a right price, I'm all for it too.
Landon Roberts at the linebacker position.
They need that guy.
Mm-hmm.
They need him just as a mascot. You can't play. I don't care. He just intimidates you. Some of those plays he made last year, just the pure physicality of him.
Yeah, he was.
I don't know how you would possibly cut that guy or not sign him back.
How about James Pierre or Cam Sutton? Are we parting ways with both of those guys, Chris?
I'm good. Yeah. Get to Cam Sutton can wander off back to wherever he came. He was in Detroit.
He's your neighbor.
I don't care. So are you. Doesn't mean I'm signing you to play
he's
corner.
Closer to you than me.
He's Chris's neighbor?
He lives right down the street there. He did. His house was for sale. I'm not quite sure if he ever sold it or not. But yeah, I think his kid goes to the same school
as your kid.
Guys, we already talked about TJ Watt and George Pickens, but here's just a few other names that are still under contract, but will they survive not getting cut? Cole Holcomb is a name that's kind of been surfaced out there as well. Of course, he was hurt, came back towards the end of the season, never played, but they could have activated him off the injured reserve. Chris, do you think Cole Holcomb will survive cuts and be part of this mix next season?
I mean, bring him back into camp if he's amenable to kind of working his way back into the rotation. I don't think you can ever have too many inside linebackers the way things work now in the NFL. But I think they've found the guys that they like. They like Queen as a 3-down linebacker. Peyton Wilson, I think, will grow into that role as well. But you don't see two inside backers, off-ball linebackers on the field together all that often anymore in today's NFL. And then, like we mentioned to Landon Roberts already. You want a thumper to come in on rundowns. I would prefer him come back. I think Cole Holcomb, if he wants to come back in, like I said, on the cheap, work his way back into the rotation in camp, that's fine. But I'm not chasing him down the street with a blank check to bring him back.
Well, he did restructure his deal, I believe, today.
Okay.
So that pretty much assures that he'll be in camp. That doesn't mean he'll make it through camp, but at least he took. When they say restructure, that's a fancy name for taking a $4 million pay cut. So he'll be back. Just now, is he going to be able to stick? I mean, he worked out a lot last year near the end of the season. So they should have a good feel on whether he can play or not. Can't have too many linebackers. Plus, he could be a good special teams guy, but that's going to be more determined in training camp if he's a cut or not. But he'll obviously be back. If not, he wouldn't have agreed to the restructure.
Last two names on my list, guys, to get your thoughts on: Isaac Salamalu and Larry Obajobi.
Ooh, it's Mac's favorites, Larry O.
Larry O can get to stepping too. I'm fine with that.
Stepping.
Yeah, get to stepping. Sayamalu, I mean,
he's a Pro Bowler. What are you talking about?
Okay, yeah, your grandma's a Pro Bowler when enough people don't go to the game.
Pro Bowler.
I don't have a problem. I want to be clear. I don't have a problem with him. He just shows these flashes of being an absolute mauler, this road grader in the run game. If they would actually use him more in some of those counters, some of those traps where they get him on the move, they don't. All too often, he's just inline blocking in the run game. And for whatever reason, and his pass blocking is what it is. It's good enough. But get him on the move, get him punching little tiny corners in the mouth and burying him in the dirt. They don't do enough of that.
Yeah, they don't have much depth in the way of guards. So if they would move on from Sayamalu, which I don't think they will, they're going to have to bring a significant guy in because I don't think you're going to go with Herbig or Spencer Anderson at that point.
We are talking with Chris Mack and Mark Kaboly here on the TroupCast here on oneBURGH this week. You can catch their podcast each and every week, the Kaboly and Mack Podcast on X, Facebook, and YouTube. Gentlemen, we have a few minutes left with both of you. Let's end with this. Chris, I'll start with you. The biggest splash for the Pittsburgh Steelers in this free agency period starting next week will be what?
Oh, man. I think it'll end up being a wide receiver. I do. I I don't think they'll make the big swing on like a DK Metcalf. I don't think they bring in a Devontae Adams or something like that. But I do think the biggest splash ends up being like a Chris Godwin. I think, look, like Mark said, they've got the cap space. He's not 30 years old yet. Another guy who might be coming off injury, but could serve as a really quality complement to George Pickens and start to fill out the receiver room, especially if you draft one in the top 3 rounds. Now, all of a sudden, you've made over the receiving room in one offseason. I think Godwin could be huge for that. I think that's the way things could end up falling, too, just based on where their attention will be and what the market will look like.
I'm going, they're going to sign Byron Murphy, cornerback. Big splash at the cornerback position. And I'm going to go either trade/sign, depending on what the Commanders do. Jonathan Allen, defensive lineman, 30 years old, still a stud. I think they could pair him nice with Hayward, Keanu Benton, some of the Dean Lowrys and the Isaiah Loudermilks, and have a pretty decent defensive line. I love Jonathan Allen. So, plus, I mean, I think obviously Watt's going to get paid. They're going to be pretty active. I think they do need to address defensive line in free agency. I mean, obviously the draft's pretty loaded, but what we learn is drafting defensive linemen doesn't necessarily mean they're going to play right away, and the Steelers need somebody who can play right away. So go get yourself a veteran that's going to cost $10-12 million, and I think that's the route they go, and draft one, of course. But
after the Eagles won the Super Bowl, guys, I talked about it here on the podcast. The Steelers need to take that recipe and build up the offensive and defensive line. And we've seen the offensive line in the last 2 drafts, taking 2 first-round picks there. But I agree, Mark, now it's time to look at that defensive line and build that defensive line up just like Philly did on both sides of the ball and then go from there. Gentlemen, thank you for coming on the TroupCast this week. We enjoyed it, and we'll have to get you guys back on again soon.
Sounds good, Ed.
Mark, any parting words of wisdom?
Yeah, I see. Max almost as old as me. I keep telling Troup to make his podcast called the F Troup, but he doesn't. Is that before your time?
This is why you are in journalism and reporting and not marketing.
F Troup. That's great.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
That's right. Yeah,
So
exactly it.
Like dry, wet, dry. It could be your own little F Troup.
Chris Mack and Mark Kaboly, gentlemen, thank you. We'll get you back here on the podcast later this spring to talk some more Steeler football, maybe even get to the Pirates or Penguins, Pitt, who knows. Lots going on in the Pittsburgh sports world as we navigate this spring. Thank you for joining us here on the TroupCast for this week. I am your host, Ed Troup. We will see you next week right here on oneBURGH. Have a great night, everyone.